Guess who were the first groups who pushed for gun control laws against black people? Check this out. During Reconstruction, all black units of the Union Leagues organized themselves as militias and warred against such white terrorist organizations as the Men of Justice and the Knights of the White Camellia, the Knights of the Rising Sun, and the Ku Klux Klan, whose primary mission was to disarm ex-slaves and thus was one of the first gun control organizations in the United States. Now tell me, these people pride themselves on being superior. That means if you think you're superior, you should be able to fight fairly. Head up, as we say in the hood. Let's go head up. Throughout history, these cowards never fought us fairly. I'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for your time and attention. We greatly appreciate it. We really do. Let's jump straight into this. Those who study history, particularly Black American history and Black folks around the world, whenever a massacre occurred or something terrorist like that, notice that the people, those Black folks, were rarely well equipped with weapons to fight back. You know, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. That is how they were able to massacre our people and terrorize our communities. So when black people start fighting back, lo and behold, gun laws came. They wanted to be able to annihilate us without us being able to defend ourselves. Now you got to ask yourself, what kind of sick mind do you have to want to just go and annihilate people and not let them have the ability to fight your ass back? That's the kind of people that we have been dealing with. People that want us to be docile and not fight back and be like, oh, let's just turn the other cheek. No, fool. I'm not going to turn the other cheek. You want me to tell you why? Because in order for me to turn the other cheek, that means you're my brother or sister in Christ. You trying to come and decimate me, destroy me and my family, you're not my brother and sister in Christ. And I have every right on this earth and in heaven to defend myself. So when they wanted us to just lie down like dead fish so they could just stomp and do whatever they wanted to us and us not fight back. Matter of fact, when we fought back, that made them more angrier or fearful. Because they knew that if we had the upper hand, that's it. It's a wrap. Let's get on with this. I'll lead with this. Food for thought. I'm speaking to Black America. Stop using lethal force against yourselves, black folks. You want police brutality to stop, black folks? Start protecting your own community, loving and protect your people. Stop taking your frustrations out on one another, and that's all it is frustration. Probably curses, but that's a whole different story. No, it ain't no probably curses. That's a whole different topic. Stop taking your frustrations out on one another. Start protecting yourself. Then the police won't have a reason to tread into your space. It stops with us. And you better arm up for real. Those people who have been, plotting, trying to fight against repercussions from their ancestors' actions, and their actions have been stockpiling guns for hundreds of years. So black folks, you better get over that, being an anti, saying you're against guns. If you put them up safely and secure them, you won't have to be concerned about guns. It's not the gun that harms you, it's the irresponsibleness of being a gun owner that harms you. Okay, let's get on with it. The first gun control laws in the New World, long before the U.S. was a nation, were established to keep guns out of the hands of black folks. Specific laws were enacted to keep slaves and free blacks unarmed. Gun control had an overarching aim targeting black Americans with surgical precision, whether in North Carolina or nationally. In 1844, the North Carolina Supreme Court upheld the law banning free blacks from carrying firearms, and the following year, slaves were slapped with a complete gun ban. Of course, the white majority was excluded from such law. Unfortunately, change is still too slow in coming, and some of these racist laws are still in effect today. North Carolina's current pistol permit system, enacted in 1919, is a direct result of Jim Crow policies that empowered white authorities to curtail handgun access to black Americans in the state. Black applicants are rejected at a rate near 3 times as high as white applicants, according to a North Carolina Law Review study published last year. This article was published in 2022. Let's continue. 20th century pistol permit laws are still a popular mechanism for excluding blacks from an inherent right. Yet North Carolina remains the only southeastern state with the law on the books today. A recent article titled "The Klan's Favorite Law" highlighted one Florida judge who said the pistol process laws were passed for the purpose of disarming the Negro laborers and never intended to be applied to the white population. This intent was evidenced when an Alabama sheriff denied Martin Luther King Jr. permit to carry a handgun in the 1950s after his home was bombed during the Montgomery bus boycott. May issue permit systems that require good cause to be shown or good character to be established allow the authorities to pick and choose who gets to own a gun. These laws have been used to prevent black Americans from exercising their rights throughout history. Although the New York Rifle and Pistol Association is currently challenging New York's May issue concealed carry permit system in the U.S. Supreme Court, these laws are still in place in 8 states across the country, and even much more restrictive ordinances have been found in some cities. The answer to this unequal distribution of rights is a constitutional carry system, which would allow all citizens to carry a gun so long as they can pass a federal criminal background check to own one. Now let's get into the main event. Have you ever heard of a man named C.O. Chin? From what I gathered, he was a bad person. Not bad as in bad, like morally deficient, like he stood up to racists, and even a racist was scared of him. He was a black man, of course. Let's get into this. I have a dream that one day children in 7th grade will have an American history textbook that is not like my son's. Its heroes will not just be people from the past who upheld the middle class values of modesty, chastity, sobriety, thrift, and industry. The rebels it celebrates will not include not only abolitionists, suffragists, labor unionists, and civil rights leaders who confined their protests to peaceful and respectable writing, speaking, striking, and marching. In my dream, school children will read about people like C.O. Chin. Chin was a black man in Canton, Mississippi, who in the 1960s owned a farm, a rhythm and blues nightclub, a bootlegging operation, and a large collection of pistols, rifles, and shotguns, with which he threatened local Klansmen and police when they attempted to encroach on his businesses or intimidate civil rights activists working to desegregate Canton and register black residents to vote. After one confrontation in which a pistol-packing Chin forced the notoriously racist and brutal local sheriff to stand down inside the county courthouse during a hearing for a civil rights worker, the lawman admitted, "There are only two bad sons of bitches in this county. Me and that nigress C.O. Chin." Although the Congress of Racial Equality and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee were formally committed to nonviolence, when their volunteers showed up in Canton, they happily received protection from Chin and the militia of armed black men he managed. Every white man in that town knew you didn't F with C.O. Chin. Remember the core activist. He'd kick your natural ass. Chin's Club Desire offered a safe haven for black performers such as B.B. King, James Brown, Hank Ballard, and the Midnighters and the Platters. Illegal liquor flowed freely in the county, and unlike their comrades in much of Mississippi, CORE and CNCC activists in Canton were able to register thousands of black voters with virtually impunity from segregationist violence. According to Charles E. Cobb's revelatory New History of Armed Self-Defense in the Civil Rights Movement, this non-violent stuff get you killed. Canton and the rest of the South could not have been desegregated without people like C.O. Chin, who were willing to take the lives of white people and were thus known as crazy Negroes, or less delicately, bad Negresses. Cobb does not discount the importance of nonviolent protests, but he demonstrates with considerable evidence that desegregation and voting rights could not have been achieved without the complementary and still unappreciated practice of armed self-defense. Noting that textbooks like My Sons ignore that many people who physically defended the movement are themselves, Cobb shows that the willingness to use deadly force ensured the survival not only of countless brave men and women, but also of the freedom struggle itself. The philosophy of nonviolence is propounded by Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights leadership that emerged in the 1950s was a new and exotic concept to black Southerners. Since before emancipation, when slaves mounted several organized armed rebellions and countless spontaneous and individual acts of violent resistance to overseers, masters, and patrollers, black men and women consistently demonstrated a willingness to advance their interests at the point of a gun. In the year following the Civil War, black men shot white rioters who attacked blacks in New Orleans and Memphis. Even the original civil rights leadership publicly believed that, as Frederick Douglass put it in 1867, a man's rights rest in three boxes: the ballot box, jury box, and the cartridge box. With the rise of Jim Crow segregation at the end of the 19th century, civil rights leaders continued to advocate meeting fire with fire. A Win Westchester rifle should have a place of honor in every black home, the famed anti-lynching crusader Ida B. Wells Barnett wrote in 1892, when on average more than one black person was lynched every 3 days in the South, and it should be used for that protection which the law refuses to give. In 1898, after a black man named Henry Deangel was accused of raping a white woman in Darien, Georgia, armed black men surrounded the jail where he was held to prevent lynch mobs from taking him. Instead of being hanged from a tree or burned at the stake, Deangel was tried and acquitted. Though blacks tended to consider Georgia the most lethal of all southern states, the coastal area where Darien was located had the fewest lynchings of any place in the state. And as I said earlier, you have to see the mentality of people who want you to not be able to protect yourself when they come and try to brutally harm you. Do you get what kind of mentality that is? Somebody who wants you to be defenseless so they can come and just annihilate you? That is a demonic, deranged, cowardice mentality. And that's the kind of people we've been dealing with in this country and around the world. Let's continue. One of the first victories of the modern civil rights movement came at the point of many guns. In the spring of 1947, after a black man named Bennie Montgomery in Monroe, North Carolina, was executed for murdering his white employer during a fight over wages, the local Ku Klux Klan threatened to take Montgomery's body from the funeral parlor and drag it through the streets of the town as a message to blacks who might consider assaulting whites. But when the Klans arrived at the funeral parlor, 36 rifles belonging to members of the Monroe branch of the National Association of the Advancement of Colored People were trained on their motorcade. The Klansmen fled. See what I'm talking about? That's a coward. These racist groups are literally cowards. And they get their so-called fake boldness by having weapons and thinking the law enforcement's going to have their back. There's going to be a time and a place where even law enforcement's not going to have your back. Or this military. Trust. And like I keep telling y'all people, it's the fear that gives these cowards power. Let's continue. This successful showdown convinced the president of the Monroe NAACP, Robert F. Williams, who later authored a book-length argument for armed self-defense titled Negroes with Guns, that resistance could be effective if we resisted in groups and if we resisted with guns. In addition to his duties with the NAACP, Williams established an all-black chapter of the National Rifle Association and used his NRA connection to procure better rifles and automatic weapons for his constituents. 10 years after the funeral parlor incidents, these guns were used to repel a Klan assault against an NAACP leader's house. Immediately following the shootout, the Monroe City Council banned Klan motorcades, and according to Williams, the KKK stopped raiding our community. Now, the only thing is we have to get these black guys from going after each other like they're the enemies. And like I say, I know it's inner frustration and taking out your frustrations against one another, but the sooner that you learn that we are not one another's enemy, and I know that everybody who look like us isn't our friend or family, but that's where you have to learn how to discern who has your back and who doesn't. And I'm going to tell you straight up, black community, let me tell you, the ones who are doing more damage against us than white racists is the boule. It's these black folks that have been assigned to pretend like they're your friends and going back, they're getting your intel. And they're going back to these folks with the power, and they're feeding these people the information they gain from you to keep oppressing you. It's the ones who look like you who are doing more harm. It's these weak, sorrowful, pathetic black politicians who have used you to get in their positions, and then they turn around and work against you. Let's continue. Theodore Roosevelt Mason Howard was another black Southerner who found guns a highly effective means to gain rights. Cobb uses Howard's story in 1950s Mississippi to illustrate the practical use of armed self-defense. For an oppressed minority, Howard, who was the chief surgeon at a hospital for blacks in Mississippi Delta, founded the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, an umbrella organization of civil rights groups in the state. The RCNL led a campaign against segregated gas stations, organized rallies featuring national civil rights leaders, and encouraged black businesses, churches, and voluntary associations to move their bank accounts to the black-owned Tri-State Bank, which loaned money to civil rights activists denied credit by white banks. Knowing that he was always at risk of being attacked by white supremacists, Howard took full advantage of Mississippi's loose gun laws. He wore a pistol on his hip, displayed a rifle in the back window of his Cadillac, and lived in a compound secured by round-the-clock armed guards. Black reporters covering the civil rights movement in Mississippi often stayed in Howard's home, which contained stacks of weapons, at least one submachine gun, and according to one visiting journalist, a large gun, a shotgun, or a rifle in every corner of every room. According to many accountants, Southwest Mississippi was the most dangerous and Klan-ridden region in the South, the stuff of black nightmares, according to Cobb. But it was also home to several of the strongest branches of the NAACP. Activists in the area were the first in Mississippi to file a school desegregation suit, a youth chapter campaigned against police brutality, and local NAACP members traveled to D.C. to testify for the 1957 Civil Rights Act. The president of the two NAACP branches, C.C. Bryant of Pike County and E.W. Steptoe of Ammonite County, offered their fortified houses as resting stops for SNCC and core organizers. One SNCC volunteer recalled that if you stayed with Steptoe, as you went to bed, he would open up the night table and there would be a large 45 automatic sitting right next to you. There were guns all over the house, under pillows, under chairs. It was for that reason that SNCC operated one of its freedom schools on Steptoe's farm. Anti-racist proponents of gun control should note an irony in this story. One aspect of Southern culture allowed for the dismantling of another. Although many whites were uncomfortable with the idea of blacks owning guns, especially in the 1960s, Cobb writes the South's powerful gun culture and weak gun control laws enabled black people to acquire and keep weapons and ammunition with relative ease. One example of this came in 1954 when the Mississippi state legislator Edwin White responded to an increase in black gun ownership with a bill requiring gun registration as protection from those likely to cause us trouble, but the bill died in committee. And as I said, why do white people have a problem with black people owning guns? Seems to me that you think your ass gonna come galloping up on a horse and just blasting people's homes away and them not being able to defend themselves. That's what you want to do. Or, two, you're scared of reaping the seeds that you and your ancestors have sown. How many of these older, I'm talking about older white people living so-called calm, quiet lives were responsible for the death of a lot of black men, women, and children that you don't know about? But when they get on their deathbed, that's when they want to reveal their horrible, wicked past, hoping that they get a pass. Let's continue. 5 days after the famous 1960 sit-in at Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, another sit-in was attempted, but the protesters were blocked from entering the store by crowds of young whites carrying Confederate flags and threatening violence. See how they always they was quick to jump to violence, but then they want to turn around and call us violent. Remember what happened last year in Montgomery when the black captain was doing his job, and you see how quickly the white folks jumped to violence? Let's continue. So football players from the historically black North Carolina Agricultural and Technical College formed a flying wedge and rammed through the mob. In Jacksonville, Florida, a gang of black youth known as the Boomerangs used their fists to beat back a group of whites who were attacking sit-in protesters with axe handles. Damn. Two of the best known civil rights organizations practicing armed self-defense were the Deacons of Defense and Justice. I have that book. I haven't read it yet. Let's continue. Which was formally incorporated in Louisiana in 1965 with the explicit purpose of providing armed protection for civil rights activists and the Lowndes County Freedom Organization of Alabama, a SNCC affiliate that renounced the national organization's nonviolent philosophy and helped inspire the formation of the Black Panther Party for self-defense in northern cities. The Deacons appeared at protests toting rifles and gained special notoriety when they aimed their guns at firemen who were preparing to unleash hoses on a group of black high school students in Jonesboro, Louisiana, as they picketed for black control of black schools. The LCFO, headed by Stokely Carmichael, who coined the slogan Black Power, was staffed by well-armed organizers who increased the number of black voters in Lowndes County from 1 when the group was established in 1965 to almost 2,000 a year later. Though national civil rights leaders publicly renounced the use of violence, many of them privately relied on it. Even the great American apostle of nonviolence himself tactically acknowledged the value of guns. During the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 and 1956, King applied for a permit to carry a concealed weapon. He was denied the license, but filled his home with firearms and allowed armed neighbors to stand guard over his family and property. More than one visitor in King's house in Montgomery described it as an arsenal. King wasn't the only civil rights leader who relied on crazy Negroes. Indeed, according to Cobb, even though most of the major civil rights organizations of the period were formally committed to nonviolence, there were few black leaders who did not seek and receive armed protection from within the black community. Many also maintained their own means of protection. Fannie Lou Hamer, whose fearlessness as an organizer in the most violent regions of Mississippi is legendary, held no qualms about owning or using firearms. "I keep a shotgun in every corner of my bedroom," she said, "and the first cracker even looks like he wants to throw some dynamite on my porch won't write his mama again." Cobb concludes from these and many other examples of black armed self-defense that the current tendency among liberals to think of gun rights as a cause championed by racists is wrong-headed. Though largely associated with the conservative white right, there was a time when people on both sides of America's racial divide embraced their right to self-protection and when rights were won because of it. But this non-violent stuff that gets you killed isn't just about rights. It's also about freedom. Freedom as a means and an end. This is the kind of freedom our children's textbooks won't mention, but I can guarantee at least one 7th grader will learn. And I conclude with this, my dear, loving, kind, beautiful people, inside and out. You have every right to defend yourself. And I'm not just talking about defending yourself against people who look like you. I'm talking about defending yourself against anybody that tries to do harm to you. And just because police are police, that does not give them a right to take your life unprovoked. Start protecting and policing your own communities. That's what we need to do. Black folks, you need to start protecting and policing your own community and stop listening to these fraudulent, fake, bought and paid for politicians and local black leaders and celebrities telling you otherwise. Any person on this earth that tries to convince you that defending yourself and owning a weapon is not good for you or can harm you, you better pay close attention to them and ask them fools how many of them have guns. You remember in 2020, I hit up the gun store and I was told that the ones that was in California preaching all this anti-guns, they was the main ones taking their asses to the gun store buying those guns. So like I said, you better look twice at a person who's telling you, who's trying to dissuade you from having your own personal protection. I don't care if it's a little small 22. You get what you can get. And ask them to train you. I have quite a few people that I know that have offered to train me. It's time to stop playing these games. And it's time to stop leaving your community open to just anybody and everybody coming through. All these Asians, Hispanics, and Indians, and white folks, you see how hard they protect their communities. And we the only ones that's supposed to be leaving our community open just for anybody and they mama to come through. Yeah, okay. Right. Okay. Well, black folks. And I'm primarily talking to you, but I'm speaking in general. We have an inherent right to protect ourselves. And although I'm not like pro-gun, I'm not like one of those pro-gun okay, I'm not even gonna go there. I'm not pro-guns, but I'm not anti-gun. I'm not. And I hope to God that I don't have to use my gun or guns to take someone's life. But I'm going to leave you with this. It's either going to be yours or mine. And I guarantee you it won't be mine. Thank you for your time and attention. I appreciate your support. Thank you for commenting, liking, and subscribing and sharing. And sharing is caring, folks. Thank you again. And I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.